And we're back. Welcome back to Route Double. When we last left off, we are getting ready to head into LABO. And finally catch up with the present. We've got a few hours to go, but only one road led to LABO. LABO Private Highway. The entrance had an inspection gate where all cars were checked. The facility was equipped with a nuclear reactor. That level of security was only to be expected. And at the entrance, Natsuhiko, Mashiro, and Sally were caught at the checkpoint as well. They were stopped by a stern-faced traffic inspector.
ラボに行きたいんです。通してください。
何を言ってるんだ君は。ダメに決まってるだろう。だいたい行くってどうやって行くんだ。ここからラボまで10キロ近くあるぞ。バカなこと言ってないで。帰った。
でも私たちここに勤めている天川博士の知り合いなんですけど。
そんなことは関係ない。この検問はいかなる人間であろうと正当な理由なしに通すわけにはいかん。ラボに行きたいのであれば6名士保安課もしくはラボの障害担当者を通じ許可を取りたまえ。
許可？それはどのくらいかかるんですか
？3日から1週間ほどかかるだろう。ま、
Not ideal.
学生が申請しても通るわけもないがね。
そんな。
ラボでテロが起きるかもしれないんですよ。
テロ？ああ、近頃市街を騒がせているあれか。それについては我々も警戒している。十分すぎるほどね。
違うんです。それだけじゃ足りないんです。ラボにはテロリストの内通者がいる可能性が高い。そのことについては考えてある？
内通者？何をわけのわからないことを言っているんだ。
I was gonna say, I've considered it, but I don't give a fuck.
もういいから、早く帰れ。そうしなければ警察に通報するぞ。
With that threat, the traffic inspector placed his hand on the phone. The police. They just cleared their names with the security department. If he called the police, things could quite possibly get troublesome again. Sally gently whispered into Natsuhiko's ear.
帰ろう、二人とも。これ以上騒ぎ立てるのは得策じゃない。
Agreed.
でも今やるべきはあくまでテロの阻止。警察や保安課を敵に回すべきじゃない。
Natsuhiko and Mashiro were finally convinced.
分かったよ。別の方策を考えよう。
それがいい。失礼しました。
間違ってももう来ないようにな。
Yeah. Kids left the inspection point with that voice at their backs.
まずいよ。どうする？
仕方ない。まずは公衆電話を探そう。警察や保安課、それからラボ関係者に連絡して注意を促すんだ。
They nodded and began walking again. They walked about the main road. They soon found two payphones lined up next to each other. Natsuhiko quickly looked up the security department number and called them.
はい、6名市役所保安課、竹橋が受けたまわります。
先ほどはお世話になりました。6名学園生徒の天川と申しますが。
なんだ、ハウスキーパー君か。どうしたね。
いや、実は。
Oh, you remember that, huh? Oh, that's awkward. Natsuhiko gave the security department member a summary of Sally's conjecture. However,
つまり、テロリストがラボを狙ってる可能性がですね。
はあ、それはもう分かった。ご協力ありがとう。
the voice on the other side of the phone had not a hint of seriousness.
ラボの方には注意を促しておくから安心してくれ。
いや、それだけじゃ不十分な気が。警備を強化するとかできないんですか？
しかし、そのために他の各施設の警備を薄くするわけにもいかないんだ。
それもわかるんですけど、そこをなんとか。
On one hand, that's the most serious point, so you'd think you would try and spare it. On the other hand, with the plan being to threaten everything, you would be spread
う
thin.
ちも可能性だけじゃ動けないんだよ。それこそ怪文書でも届いていればいいんだが。 ともかく市内の警戒態勢を強化しておくよ。
わかりました。じゃあお願いします。
Natsuhiko drooped his shoulders and hung up.
どうだった？
一応話は聞いてくれたけど、そっちは？
While Natsuhiko was calling the security department, Mashiro was contacting the police. But she just looked dejected and shook her head.
ダメだよ全然。警備は十分に行っていますの一点張り。
話が大きすぎて信用してもらえないのか。
どうする？
Right when Sally muttered that, they heard footsteps approaching in the distance. Uh-oh. Natsuhiko gasped and looked back. There was a single man walking on the other side of the street. He was covering his face with a jacket hood and sunglasses, even though it was nighttime.
むしろ、サリュ、あの男。
Mashiro and Sally looked at the man after Natsuhiko whispered to them. The man was tall. They could tell he was quite muscular even through his jacket. There was a strange intensity about him as well.
バスの中にいた男か。
そうかも。少なくとも体格は似てるよ。近づいてくる。
The man walked straight towards them, never looking to either side. What if he's a terrorist? The fact that he was approaching without hiding or running away probably meant that he had business with them. The fact that he wasn't on guard meant he could be armed. Don't tell me he's here to silence us. Natsuhiko promptly put himself on guard. The man wasn't a terrorist, he just walked past them. The man stopped about 50 meters away from the kids, but then he suddenly made a mad dash at them. Oh fuck.
マシロ、サリュ、逃げるぞ。
Natsuhiko turned back and tried to run. On the other side of the road was just a single straight path continuing on forever. It was not a distance he could run while taking Mashiro with him.
こっちだ、脇道に入れ。
In a daze, Natsuhiko dragged Mashiro and Sally into the side road. They ran down the unpaved road. You could tell the man was following them. They made a desperate run for their life in the darkness with nary a streetlight. Soon enough, Natsuhiko realized something. This street was familiar. This path leads to... That's right, it should lead to the ruined factory. He didn't know if taking refuge in those ruins would be a blessing or a curse. But he knew that if they kept running, their chances of escaping were low.
二人ともこっちだ。
Natsuhiko shouted and rushed into the ruined factory. All roads lead back here. They tried to catch their breath as quietly as they could. With stealthy steps, they hid under cover. As they held their breath, they heard Mashiro using telepathy. Natsuhiko and Sally answered her in a whisper.
わからない。このままこの廃工場に気づかず通り過ぎてくるのか。
落下はできない。もし奴が来たら先手を打って奇襲する。
Mashiro quietly gasped at those words.
奇襲？あんな大きな男の人を？相手が格闘技術を持っていなければ問題ない。また格闘技術や武器を持っていたとしても不意をつけばなんとかなる。
大丈夫なのか。
大丈夫。相手が一人だったらだけど。
What if he's not alone? As soon as that thought crossed Natsuhiko's mind, he heard footsteps outside the factory. Here we go. Natsuhiko shrunk down and held his breath. Footsteps slowly came into the factory. A number of footsteps revealed that he was alone.
相手が一人。なんとかなる。
Sally silently nodded.
私たちも手伝った方がいい。
Sally silently shook her head.
一人でやれるの？
Sally nodded and smiled. as if to tell Mashiro to relax. Footsteps drew closer. So close they could almost feel the man's breath. Sally slowly calculated her timing and jumped out of her cover. Sally's shadow danced in the darkness. They could hear the man gasp. Sally moved faster than the man could ready himself, and landed a roundhouse kick solidly on his head. Oh! The man silently fell to the floor.
やった。
すごい、さすがサリュー。
Maybe don't give our position away so quickly. Sally looked away as if embarrassed by Natsuhiko and Mashiro's praise. Make sure he's down.
それよりこの男、何者だろう。
状況から察するにテロリストっぽいけど。
気絶から覚めるのを待って聞いてみる？
いや、それは危険な気がする。マシロ、エンパシーでこの男の心を読めるか？
どうだろう。気絶した人の心なんて読んだことないから。でもちょっとやってみるよ。
Seems rather invasive,
僕も
but
試してみよう。
let's see. Natsuhiko and Mashiro put their finger to their brows, concentrated their consciousness on the fainted man, and focused deeply on the desire to read his mind. Tell me, who are you? Are you really a terrorist? He focused on that question with all his heart, all his mind. Deepened his concentration, and eventually his 5 senses faded. Yes, that's a sensation. Activated empathy. But when he made that realization, his lost senses were replaced. The sound of a bizarre voice. But the voice was nothing but the unintelligible vestiges of thought. He only heard fragments of noise. No matter how carefully he searched, the result was the same. Damn it, I can't figure out anything like this. Guess it really doesn't work, huh? Can't exactly open your heart if you're conked out. Natsuhiko stopped concentrating and spoke to Mashiro.
マシロ、そっちは。
Natsuhiko gasped before he could finish. Mashiro was standing stock still with her eyes peeled wide open.
夏彦。
We let our guard down, and now we are in trouble. Gasped and traced Mashiro's gaze. Only to see 2 unfamiliar men suddenly standing there in the darkness. Here we go. This is the thing that they foreshadowed a long time ago. Only then did Natsuhiko notice. Oh shit! That Sally was collapsed at the men's feet. That the man on the left was holding a gun. There was no room for doubt. In no uncertain terms, these men were terrorists. Damn it, so he really did have allies. Natsuhiko cursed his carelessness. Once Natsuhiko tried to use BC, his 5 senses died out. In other words, he became oblivious to what was going on around him. These new guys come in from the back and knock Sally out. It seems she was only unconscious, judging by the lack of blood. But now that Sally, the only one among them with combat skills, was incapacitated, they had no means of a counter-offensive. Mashiro muttered Sally's name in a trembling voice and tried to walk up to her. That voice stopped her. Natsuhiko stood to cover for Mashiro, upon which the 3rd man spoke. Trying to see if I recognize any voices here. From after. I don't actually remember what Watase's voice was. Yeah, that's him I'm looking for.
どうして僕らの名前を。
調べさせてもらったよ。俺たちの計画について嗅ぎ回っている子供がいると聞いたね。
A cold chill ran down Natsuhiko's spine. He had never expected to be apprehended by the enemy so easily. These guys, even a huger organization than we thought? The man continued as Natsuhiko found himself at a loss for words.
正義感も行き過ぎると身を滅ぼすことになる。悪いが処理させてみるぞ。
殺すのか。
The other man answered the question quite briefly.
ああ、殺す。待て、死体が出たら目立つだ。だが計画の前にはわずかな不安要素もあってはならない。違うか。もちろんだ。だからひとまず眠っていてみろ。
Eh? Not 1 second after the man finished talking, he ran over to Mashiro and swiftly hit her in the neck with a knife hand strike. Mashiro gasped before collapsing on the spot.
何をする。
眠っててもらえと言ったはずだ。
お前、よくも真っ白。
Natsuhiko gave in to his anger and tried to strike the man. But the man dodged all too easily and wrapped around behind him. The very next moment, the man wrapped his thick arm around Natsuhiko's neck. Natsuhiko's breathing stopped. The man wrung out every last bit of air from his lungs. But all the strength in Natsuhiko's body was not enough to make the man budge one bit. Gripping the man's arm was enough to show Natsuhiko the hopeless difference in strength between them. His consciousness started to fade into the distance. Damn it. Is this where it ends? There was nothing more that Natsuhiko could do. As soon as he understood the extent of his own powerlessness, fury burst up from inside him. At the very least, we at least know what exactly these guys are plotting. He screamed from the depths of his mind to not to let things end this way. A torrent of rage surged from inside Natsuhiko. No sympathy or anything at all. Show me what's in their minds. As that thought crossed his mind, Natsuhiko's vision blanked out. What? A bizarre vision arose from the black of his mind. Eh? He saw an unfamiliar room. He heard someone's voice from right beside him.
口を塞ぐのか。
This has to be him, right? Then he heard someone else answer.
やむを得ないだろう。俺たちに子供を殺せと。そこまではするな。脅しをかけ、縛り上げればいい。保安課も動いている。睨まれるとまずいし、ラボの警戒レベルを上げるわけにもいかん。決行は明日なんだから。
D-Day. Right as Natsuhiko heard up to that point, the voices quickly faded away. The vision disappeared too. What? Natsuhiko gasped. What just happened? He had a feeling it was a little different from empathy. One thing was for certain. The real target was LABO after all. And D-Day is tomorrow. Stop. Natsuhiko's consciousness faded away before he could tell anyone anything. His sight sank into darkness and his hearing fell silent too. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Yet for some reason... Yep, I knew that was coming. Tick-tock, tick-tock, baby. I heard the painfully loud ticking of a watch's second hand. And mixed in with that sound, he heard a faint voice. was Yuri's voice. This is a telepathy voice. Yuri? He sounded somehow sad.
ヒコリンはたどり着いちゃったんだね。
Huh?
あれがコミュニケーターの行き着くところ。
The apex of a communicator's...
ある能力。心と心をつなぐ力。
Oh. Connecting minds rather than just brains.
だけど、それはもう使わない方がいいよ。知らなくてもいいことを知ってしまうかもしれないから。
No way. Like hell there's something I'd rather not know. Natsuko shouted voicelessly. I learned what their goal was. Our conjecture was right. So we have to do something. By the time he made that realization, it was too late. Natsuko's consciousness was blanking out. A short silence passed, and then Yuri seemed just a little bit happy.
そうだよね。ヒコリンならそう思うよね。
Is this whole setup somehow her using that ability on us?
だったら諦めちゃダメだよ。もう真実はすぐそこにあるんだから。ヒコリンなら必ずたどり着けるから。
That voice faded into the distance. Eventually, even the sound of the watch's second hand faded out. And ceased. Oh, here we go. November 16th, at that place. Natsuko had a detailed recollection of what happened yesterday. Remember the day he had learned the truth, confronted the enemy, and suffered defeat. And today, the gate closed in front of them, sending Natsuhiko into a crisis alongside Yuri and Mashiro. But even so, like hell am I gonna give up? He had that conviction. Yuri stood beside him and whispered softly into his ear.
ヒコリン、思い出したでしょ。たくさんの障害を超えて、ヒコリンはここにやってきた。ヒコリンは過去を乗り越えられる力を手に入れたんだよ。これから何が起ころうと、ヒコリンの心は折れない。
Those words fortified Natsuhiko's mind even further. Though his head still hurt, he gritted his teeth and bore it. Mashiro called out to Natsuhiko in his silence.
夏彦、ユーリと何を話しているの?
Well, there goes my theory. Natsuhiko smiled and answered her.
勇気をもらってたんだ。
え？
マシロ、まだ諦めちゃダメだ。脱出の道はきっとある。
It's like they just casually dunked on my theory.
でもゲートが開かないんじゃどこにも。
いや、セキュリティカードを探すんだ。カードさえあれば第6エリアに行ける。
Closer inspection of the gate revealed a card slot. Natsuhiko, Mashiro, and Yuri didn't have a security card, but if they found one, they could probably open the gate.
警報が鳴った直後、施設内はあれだけパニックになっていた。職員の誰かがカードを忘れていってもおかしくない。
そうか。
A little bit of Mashiro's cheerfulness had returned to her voice. It may have been just a sliver of hope, but they had no choice but to wager on it. I swear I'll find a card, and get these two girls out of here if it's the last thing I do. Natsuhiko made that conviction and ran off once more.
手分けして探そう。マシロはそっちの部屋を頼む。
わかったよ。じゃあヒコリンは奥の方の部屋をお願い。
ああ、任せろ。
Natsuhiko followed Yuri's suggestion and plunged into that room. It was a small personal office about 9 square meters in size. It's a mess, huh? Maybe I can find a card here somewhere. Natsuhiko quickly started searching for a card. First he tried searching through the desk drawers. All they found were metal boxes of some sort, nothing like a card. They don't know anything about AD. Do they even need it? Since the three of them are communicators, technically. He quickly gave up on the drawers and started looking on top of the desk. Then something entirely different on the desk caught his eye. Digital photo frame decorated the desk. The photo currently displayed was a photo of Natsuhiko himself.
なんで僕の写真が
As he looked at the picture, he remembered when the photo was taken. The day he entered high school was one of the rare days his mother came home. She took the photo with her PDA camera that evening. Don't tell me this is Mom's personal office. Natsuhiko gasped. As he looked at that picture, he was struck by the tremendous sense that there was something out of place. Natsuhiko was sitting on the sofa alone. He remembered being confused when his mother abruptly pointed her PDA at him. Something's not right here. What? The uncanny feeling became too much for Natsuhiko and he averted his eyes from the photo. Only for his gaze to land on a file rack nearby. What does that mean? The files appear to be organized by year. And the file labeled 2021 in particular. This wasn't the time to be snooping. Natsuhiko reached out for the file as if entranced. The answer just might be in here. As soon as that thought crossed his mind, he felt someone's presence. Ah, Yuri! He looked up in shock to find Yuri standing by the room's entrance.
Yuri?
This is the truth that she doesn't want to... She thinks we shouldn't figure out, huh? I'm really confused. But this is also really ominous. 2021, the incident in LABO. Weird dissonance with Natsuhiko being alone on the couch after the incident. Dissonance with that specifically. That's unusual. What does this imply about what happened to Yuri? Natsuhiko interrogated her.
君はこのことを知っていて僕をこの部屋に入れたのか
私がヒコリンを違うよ。ヒコリンが自分でこの部屋を選んだんだよ。
どういう意味だ
9年前もこの部屋に来たでしょ。火と煙に追われて。あの時カードは見つけられなかったね。だけど今回は必ず見つかる。
どうしてわかる
見落としているだけなんだよ。ヒコリンはすでにカードのありかを知ってるはずだよ。
That's really weird, because Marshall just acknowledged that Yuri exists. And yet... this Yuri still exists. Yuri looked at Natsuhiko as she spoke.
それを探してマシロンと一緒に逃げて。
What happened to you, Yuri?
真っ白とってユーリはどうするんだ
私は一緒に行けないの。
Are you haunting this place?
どうして
Did you die 9 years ago?
ヒコリンもそろそろ気づいているんじゃない？
Yuri smiled, a lonely smile. Are you a ghost? For all this talk about Communicator, leftover telepathy ghosts, are you a ghost? Yuri smiled a lonely smile. What does she mean? Nobody know? The reason? Oh boy, gradually Natsuhiko began to notice. The sights he saw, the sounds he heard, and the feelings he felt. All the memories he was recollecting were approaching the present. The recollections in the present were about to overlap temporarily. Natsuhiko's watch began to move again, as if to press him to move as well. The date display said 9/16. The hands pointed to 3/19 today.
ヒコリン、今日見聞きしたことを思い出して。
Oh, we're going back
そこ
again.
に真実はあるから。
With Yuri's whisper, Natsuhiko's consciousness went back 4 hours in time. Okay. In the starless darkness, Natsuhiko found himself on the ground. The sound of a watch echoed faintly nearby. Natsuhiko awoke to that sound. What is happening?
ここは
He was still in the ruined factory. The day of the incident. Oh, fuck. Apparently the men had tied him up while he was out cold. Just how much time had passed since he had lost consciousness? As he pondered that question, he heard people groaning beside him.
夏彦。
It was Mashlo and Salio. They had both just woken up, it seemed. Oh. Hi.
二人とも無事だったか。
無事かな。どこも痛くないし。でも身動きは取れない模様。
Natsuhiko finally noticed. His hands and feet were bound by stiff rope. On closer inspection, Mashlo and Sally were bound in the same way.
あ、何これ。私たちを逃がさないためだと思う。
No matter how much strength he put into his arms and legs, the ropes wouldn't budge. Damn it, we need to free ourselves and stop these guys. As if in response to Natsuhiko's impatience, a strained cry echoed out from the darkness.
アリスは壊されなかったんだね。よかった。アリス、こっちへ。
Oh! Hello. Alice ran over to Sally as if in response to her voice.
待て、アリスって自立歩行ができるのか？
簡易的な機能だけどできる。口頭で命令して歩かせることや順路データを入力することも。
Is it nifty?
なるほど。それならサリュー、アリスに何かこの縄を切るものを取ってきてもらえないか？
Alice also has razor-sharp teeth.
あ、その手があったか。
For looking around, they spotted some glass shards scattered on the ground beneath the window.
ではアリス、以下命令。15メートル直進後、そこにある破片を拾い、現座標に回帰。以上命令。
Alice responded confidently and headed to the window. She spent a moment there looking for the object Sally commanded her to find. Eventually, she came back with a shard of glass in her mouth. Oh.
やったー、でかしたアリス。
Natsuhiko twisted himself around to take the glass shard from Alice.
ちょっと待ってろ。とりあえず僕が抜け出してみんなの縄も切る。
Natsuhiko pressed the rope against the shard as hard as he could. Somehow he managed to cut his hands and feet free of the rope. It sounded more like cutting wood. Then he cut Mashlo and Sally free too.
ようやく解放されたよ。ありがとう、夏彦。
The girls also appeared to be uninjured after all. Apparently, the terrorists' goal here was only to entrap the kids and nothing more.
それにしても、テロリストたちの意図がわからない。私たちを生かしておく意味はないはずなのに。
いや、奴らの目的はあくまでもラボだ。僕らを殺したりして目立つのを恐れたんだろう。
なんでわかるの？
実際に聞いたからだよ。奴らの心の声を。
声を聞いたって？エンパシーで？
まあ、多分。
Even though he thought it was empathy, something still felt off about it to Natsuhiko. The ability Natsuhiko activated right before he fainted seemed a little different from empathy. Not only did he hear a voice, but he also saw a vision. Was that still empathy? Then he recalled the words he had once heard Anna say.
BC の可能性は無限なの。いつかはテレパシーでもないエンパシーでもない第三の能力が現れるかもしれないのよ。
Third ability. That was a possibility. Natsuhiko's BC ability was rapidly growing these last few days. Though he had yet to master either telepathy or empathy, he had become able to use both abilities within just a few days. Could it really be? There was no time to stop and consider the possibility. Right now, the information he gained from that ability was far more important than the ability itself.
とにかく奴らの心の声によるとラボが狙われているのは本当らしい。しかも決行は今日だ。
今日？じゃあすぐ止めなきゃ。でもどうすれば警察などに通報しても昨日と同じ結果になりかねない。
確かに。
Even if they explained everything to the security department and the police, it seemed highly unlikely that they'd make it in time. Natsuhiko silently pondered. Should we go directly to LABO and tip them off there? That would be dangerous. There was a high probability that Q had a sleeper agent there. He could very well wind up caught in the terrorist attack themselves. That would almost certainly get them killed. In that case, shouldn't we run for it as soon as possible? We could bring Mashino and Sally straight home so they could take Yuri out of the city. It seemed to be the most proper course of action to him. But Mashino would never accept that. It would be a different story if it were just him, but there was no way he could expose the girls to danger. However, then I'd be abandoning all the people in town. Is it okay to ignore all the people we don't know? He always had. That was what Natsuhiko's life had taught him. He didn't care about the fires, the accidents, or the violent events he saw on the news or TV. They had nothing to do with him, after all. They weren't important. Pretty much the only people important to him were himself, Yuri, and perhaps Mashito and Salyu, too. That's what he had always thought. But in the back of his mind, he thought about all those people in town who had nothing to do with him at all. Classmates he had associated with at a distance. Childhood friends who had left him after learning he was a communicator. And Anna would not open her heart to them. Damn, what does that all even matter? If the nuclear reactor melts down, everyone will die, won't they? This town will become uninhabitable. Won't it? It means the obvious course of action is to prioritize our own escape, hasn't it? Isn't it? Right then, suddenly, memories of various statements Natsuhiko had heard recently came echoing back into his mind.
それじゃあヒコリン後悔するかもしれないよ。私は私なりのやり方でこの町を守る。あんたたちもやれることをやるんだ。いいかい？そうして過去を乗り越えて。ヒコリンならできるはずだから。
Overcome the past, and then Natsuhiko realized. Even if they tried to escape now, that wouldn't necessarily mean they could. When residents need to go through strict checks and procedures to come in and out of the city. Can I still take Yuri out of the city despite that? It seemed difficult. We could go to LABO, or we could try to escape. They were in danger regardless. In that case, we should go to LABO. Natsuhiko surprised himself with the conclusion he came to. His convictions only grew stronger. 9 years ago, Natsuhiko and Yuri went to LABO and got into an accident. The fear he felt that fateful day had yet to fade. Might face death once more. Might lose something precious. That was no reason to stop. I have to go, don't I, Yuri? Or else I'll never be able to overcome the past. As soon as that thought crossed Natsuhiko's mind, Mashito gasped.
夏彦、もしかして 今から直接ラボに行くつもり？
Both Natsuhiko and Salu's eyes opened wide at those words.
どうしてそれを？
エンパシーを使ったの？使わなくてもわかるよ。長い付き合いなんだもん。
I see. There's no hiding it from Mashiro, huh? Natsuhiko answered her with a smile of resignation.
なあ、マシロ。3日前の夜のお前の気持ち、ようやく分かったよ。これからラボでテロが起こることを知っているのは、今この街で僕らだけだ。そんな状況になると、どうしたって使命感って湧いてくるもんなんだな。僕が行かなきゃ、この街が滅んじまう。それがテレビの向こうの出来事なんかじゃなくて、自分に関係のある出来事なら、やっぱり行かなきゃいけないよな。
He had thought that by avoiding danger, he could live in peace. No matter how much he tried to avoid danger, his peace would crumble. As Natsuhiko finally realized that, Salu softly spoke up.
夏彦がラボに行ったからって何もできないかもしれない。警備関係者に注意を促しても信じてもらえない可能性は高い。
だけど行かなかったら僕は多分後悔する。もう後悔なんてしたくないんだよ。
Natsuhiko had built up countless regrets prior to today. Countless times he thought if only we hadn't gone to LABO that day. But now it was the opposite. He would regret it if he didn't go to LABO.
だったら私たちも。
いや、真っ白たちまで来る必要はない。一人いれば十分だ。
じゃあ私たちはどうすれば？
頼みがあるんだ。すぐに家に帰ってユーリを連れて少しでも遠くに逃げてくれ。ユーリが泣いても叫んでも引きずって言ってくれ。万が一のことが起きた時のために。
Natsuhiko looked the girls in the eye, but Mashiro glanced back at him.
冗談じゃないよ。ここまで来て帰れって私が素直に帰ると思ってんの？9年前、夏彦と優里はラボで事故に遭ったよね。それで私がどんな気持ちになったと思う？死ぬほど後悔したよ。止めりゃよかったって。鈍い夏彦だってそのくらい分かってんでしょ。今だって止めたいよ。逃げるなら逃げるで夏彦とも一緒に逃げたいよ。
How the turntables.
でも夏彦、どうせ止めてもラボに行くのやめないでしょ。9年前と同じにさ。だったら私もせめて一緒に行きたい。二度と後悔したくないのは私も同じなんだよ。
Mashiro's voice was trembling. Those were probably words that Mashiro had kept locked inside her heart for years.
でも真っ白、やっぱりそれは。
Whether it's the destination, or the danger they've discovered here, or a combination of both, feels like Mashiro some point hit the point where she realized that this was absolutely serious. And so she's kind of reined herself back in a bit, but she doesn't want to let us go. Now she's more worried for us, which is absolutely fair. When Natsuhiko still persisted on stopping Mashiro from joining him, Sally sighed and spoke up.
私も同感。夏彦は言っても止まらない。危険を避けているなどと言いつつ、真っ白や有利が絡むと簡単にその菌が破れる。
いや、まあ。
矛盾だらけで御しがたい。それはこの数日でよく分かった。止めても無駄なら仕方がない。私も一緒に行く。
Natsuhiko gasped at those words.
ちょっとおい、何言ってんだ。今の話聞いてなかったのか？
そうだよ。危険なんだよ。 私は9年前のことがあるからともかくとしても、なんでサリまで一緒に来なきゃならないの？
Because I can fight.
いや、むしろ行くのが当然。あなたたち2人でラボに行って、もしテロリストに遭遇したら対抗する術がない。違う？そりゃそうだけど、サリだって昨夜テロリストに KO されたじゃん。そう、私が後悔しているのは昨夜のこと。私が奴らを倒していれば今こんなに悩むことはなかった。だから私も行く。これは決定事項。覆すことはできない。それに何より私の役目は夏彦を守ることだから。
So yes, we weren't exactly getting rid of her, even if we wanted to. Sally spoke in one breath in the same level-headed tone she used when they had first met. Between the lines, Mashito and Natsuhiko could tell that she was worried about them.
ああ、もうどうしてそんなに2人とも分からずやなんだ。
Mashito and Sally threw Natsuhiko's vitriol back at him.
夏彦に言われたくないよ。3人とも考えが一緒なだけだよ。まったく同感。
Natsuhiko smiled wryly at their words. I guess there's no stopping you two either, huh? He was headed towards a terrorist target with 2 girls as his only allies. It was quite an absurd proposition and an extremely dangerous one at that. Yet Natsuhiko was starting to feel that he was okay with it. Damn it, why? My fear from 9 years ago hadn't faded after all those years. So why is it only softening now that I know I've got those 2 by my side? Beginning to understand how Mashito felt more and more. But the simple notion that he was not go alone was so encouraging. Natsuhiko grinned at the girls and spoke deliberately in a deliberately cheerful voice.
分かった分かったよ2人とも。僕の負けだ。
夏彦、それじゃ
こうして言い争ってる時間がもったいない。仕方ないから3人で行こう。
何それ、態度悪いな。私より弱いくせに。
確かにな。
Though he was laughing, Natsuhiko swore to himself. And no matter what happened from here on out, he'd protect these 2. He was physically weaker than Salium, and he was less skilled with BC than Mashito. I'd say you're better at BC in a pinch, so protecting them was the only way he could repay them for the courage they provided him.
それじゃいいかい2人とも。
了解。うん、いつでも行けるよ。
行こう。この町を守りに。
The kids nodded at each other and dashed off. They dashed out of the ruined factory and ran onto the main road. Eventually they saw the inspection gate that led to LABO. It was now 4 a.m., 2 hours until the watch breaks. Just as they suspected, there was a traffic inspector there. You could see a different man at the inspection gate than the inspector that they saw last night.
そうだよね。夜中でも明け方でも当然いるよね。
話してみるか。
それじゃあ昨夜とまた同じやり取りになりかねない。だから突破しよう。
突破？
まず私がおとりになる。2人はその隙に検問を越えてしばらく走ったらそこで待っていて。必ず追いつくから。
おう。
After receiving confirmation from Natsuhiko, Sally headed straight for the front of the inspection gate.
よし、行こう、マシロ。
Natsuhiko and Mashito hid beside the inspection gate for now. Eventually, they heard the traffic inspector call for Sally to stop.
ちょっと君、待ちなさい。こんな夜中にどこに行くのかね。
When the traffic inspector began his interrogation, Sally answered in a feeble voice.
そのお父さんが酔っ払って家で暴れていて家に居づらいんです。
何?
What? Traffic inspector was caught off guard, but Natsuhiko was completely shocked. Apparently, Sally was doing improv to distract the traffic inspector. Traffic inspector completely fell for it as he listened intently to her story. Oh, I feel bad that we're deceiving you now.
私連れ子だからお母さんも助けてくれないし。
Mashita whispered in disbelief as to what she was hearing.
サリュー、あんなゲートできたんだ。
She's clever.
ああ、内容はベッタベタだけど効果はバッチリだな。
As they peeked at him from under the cover, they could tell the traffic inspector was completely focused on Saliu. He didn't seem to be aware of their presence at all.
今だよ、行こう夏彦。
ああ、
Natsuhiko and Mashita took that chance to jump out of cover. They slid into the traffic inspector's blind spot and slipped through the gate. Once they were through, they ran for it. You could hear Saliu's conversation from behind. Their voices faded into the distance before long.
大丈夫かな、サリュー。
Mashita stopped and whispered after they had run for a while.
そうだな。とにかく待とう。
Natsuhiko stopped and pondered. She told us to wait, but how exactly does Sally plan to catch up with us? After they waited and pondered the question for a while... Whoa! Suddenly Sally popped up from underneath the overpass.
お待たせ。
Jesus!
うわ、サリュー。
どうやって追いついたの？監視員を適当にあしらってから一度下の道に降りて、それから高架の柱をよじ登ってきた。
Mashita and Natsuhiko timidly responded to Sally's matter-of-fact explanation.
サリュー、忍術修行も積んでたの？3年ほど。まだ未熟だけど、民法加藤の術くらいなら。
Fire breath!
できるのか？
できない。これは冗談。
Okay, good.
あら。
Oh. Mashita's shoulders plopped down.
なんで忍術の名前なんて知ってんだ？
ある SF 小説に出てくる。作品そのものはつまらなかったけど、
Tah.
夏彦たちに出会ってから私なりに他者に溶け込む方法を探ってみた。
Oh.
今の冗談もさっきの演技もその一環。どうだった？
Quite good.
冗談はなんというかハイブローだけど。
I liked it, though.
演技は一級品だったぞ。僕らも仰天した。
That is true, though.
そう。
Sally smiled at their answer. Natsuhiko and Mashita returned the smile and they were back to running to the other end of the overpass, to LABO. That was a path that only people authorized by LABO could traverse. Direct 10-kilometer path without any forks or exits. Their footsteps echoed through the overwhelming silence. Eventually, Sally looked to the side of the street and whispered.
夏彦、またカメラが。
On the other side of her gaze was a surveillance camera.
それじゃあサリュー、さっきと同じように頼む。
わかった。少し待ってて。
Sally softly stepped toward the surveillance camera and connected Alice. They had already neutralized 7 cameras like this. Wow.
1時間くらい歩いたかな。
Yeah, 5.
まだ半分くらいだね。もうちょっと急いだ方がいいかな。
いや、そろそろペースを落とそう。スタミナ切れになったら余計に遅くなる。
Sally returned as Natsuhiko finished speaking.
夏彦、真っ白、終わった。
よし、それじゃあサリュー、ここからは歩いていこう。
それがいい。検問があんな様子だったところを見ると、まだテロリストはラボに向かってないと思う。
Kids walked off into the silence once more. A sense of loneliness overcame them, as if they had walked into a world all their own.
ねえ、夏彦。
何？
直接ラボに行って内通者の存在を伝えるって言ってたけど、具体的には誰に伝えるつもりなの？
God, I hope you don't tell the sleeper agent.
超神経の時みたいに警備員も犯人の一味かもしれないんだよ。
That indeed was a possibility. The sleeper agent might not be Yukita. There might also be more than one.
エンパシーを使って信用できそうな人を探すしかないか。
Once Natsuhiko said that, Sally quietly spoke up.
いや、天下は博士に会うべきだと思う。
母さんに？昨日は話も聞いてくれなかったじゃないか。また取り合ってもらえない可能性が高いぞ。
分かってる。
あの人は身勝手で僕の言うことなんて聞かなくて、昔から。なのになんで母さんなんだ？僕はあの人を当てには。
それでも夏彦は信じるべき。
Sally interrupted. She spoke in a tone that wouldn't take no for an answer.
夏彦が気づこうとしてないだけ。博士がどれほど夏彦のことを案じているかを忘れたの？私の夏彦を守るという役目は元はといえば博士に命じられたものだということを。
Now that you mentioned it, that was true. Should have known that for days. Ever since Sally had come to the house, and yet...
その一点から判断しても博士は夏彦の身を強く案じている。違う？
でもどうして母さんはそんなことを？
詳しい事情は私も本当に聞いていない。だけど天川家に来る直前、博士はこう言っていた。どれだけ強固な砦を築いても完全な平穏は保証されない。適精度 S の夏彦は他のコミュニケーターより危険な目に遭う確率が高い。でも私は一緒にいてあげられない。だからゆい、あなたが夏彦を守ってあげて。
母さんがそんなことを。
It was hard to believe at first, but part of it sounded familiar. And you mean, that's what that voice meant? The voice he had heard from his mother yesterday. I knew it. He hates me. But until all the work is completed, it'd be best if I avoided him. Natsuhiko was rendered speechless as Sally continued.
博士はこうも言っていた。あなたも夏彦も心に欠けた部分がある。でもだからこそ共に補完し合えるはず。
She was right on the money there. We've both helped each other.
私は期待しているの。私が夏彦に与えられないものをユイが与えてくれることを。私がユイに与えられないものを夏彦が与えてくれることを。その言葉を聞いた時は意味がよくわからなかった。夏彦に出会ってから、真白と友達になってから、博士は嘘を言わなかった。だから信じるに足る。
Natsuhiko gazed at Sally. Her firm expression somewhat resembled his mother's. Mashiro quietly spoke up as well.
夏彦、サリュの言ってることは本当だよ。博士はさ、いっつも夏彦のこと考えてるんだよ。だいたい私がご飯作りに通うようになったのだって博士に頼まれたからだったでしょ。
確かにそうだ。
博士は考えたんだよ。家を空けがちな自分の代わりに夏彦と一緒にいる家族が必要だって。
Yeah?
ユーリと二人きりじゃ心の傷が深くなるばっかりだって思ってさ。きっとサリュが天川家に住むようになったのもそれを狙ってのことだと思うよ。
Natsuhiko was taken aback. He realized that the three residents in the Tenkawa household, Natsuhiko, Yuri, and finally Sally, had one thing in common. That was the lack of deep familial bonds. They knew not the warmth of a family. Is that what she meant by us completing each other? The moment he came to that realization, all doubts in his mind melted away. Why his mother had taken custody of Yuri, why she brought Sally to their home, why she had ordered Sally to protect him. All tied back to that single intention his mother had. Why, Mom? Why haven't you ever said a word about this? That question came to mind, Natsuhiko took a look at the watch wrapped around his wrist. Single intent. Is this? Was a Salvia branded watch. It was a gift his mom had given him in the distant past. Is this what we went back here to remember it? To remember? Memory of when he had received that watch rose up in Natsuhiko's heart. Years ago, was it? That's right, it was when I was 5. Right after Dad died. Oh. Natsuhiko should know that there's definitely a card here, because surely Miyoko, after finding out her kids were in her office and couldn't get out because they didn't have a card, surely she'd keep something in there going forward for emergencies, right? His mother was not as much of a workaholic back then. Even after her beloved husband had died from illness, she showed no tears to her son, but a soft smile instead. Once things had calmed down after the funeral, Natsuhiko's mother gently spoke to her son, who had yet to stop crying.
Natsuhiko, あなたにこの時計を送るわ。
え、時計？
お父さんの時計よ。
Oh.
若い頃に私が送って、あの人が最後の際までつけていた時計。
It was a memento of his father. Mother changed the strap and fastened it to her son's wrist.
一緒にお父さんからあなたに宛てた手紙があるの。
With that, she handed Natsuhiko a letter. The letter was written in a simple hiragana so that Natsuhiko could read it at his age. Dearest Natsuhiko, I'm sorry for leaving you behind and dying while you're still so young. I'm sure you're sad, I'm sorry. But you mustn't cry forever. I'm sure your mom will be sad if you cry. Your mom might look strong. There are many more delicate things about her than you would expect, so please support her. You're a strong boy. You've inherited my sense of justice, and you have a heart that won't lose to pain or sadness. I'm proud of you for that. No matter how painful it gets, don't you cry. Protect those weaker than you. The more you protect people, the tougher things will get. Get hurt a lot too. But I'll be up in heaven watching over you in return. So be strong. I love you, my son. Your father, Shun. The handwriting was terribly rough, perhaps because it was written when his father was in his sickbed. Seeing the disheveled letters made him want to cry again. Natsuhiko desperately held in his tears. As he held tightly onto the letter with quivering hands, his mother gently embraced him.
お父さんはいつでもあなたと一緒にいるわ。そして私もこれからもずっと。
There were tears in her eyes as she said that.
お母さん、どうして泣くの？お父さんがいなくなっても僕が一緒にいるから。
Oh, how things changed since then.
だから泣かないで。
They drifted apart, not out of her indifference. Out of her regret? Professor nodded and softly closed her eyes. The first tears he ever saw his mother cry quietly spilled down to the floor with a faint sound. He'd never seen his mother cry again until yesterday. Shortly after his father's death, his mother began working day and night as if to distract herself from the sadness. She came home less and less. His father told him to protect his mother, but Natsuhiko came to think that his mother was someone who could live on her own. Eventually, Natsuhiko put the letter away inside his desk and sealed the once precious memory away in his mind, seldom to be recalled again. That's why I've always used this watch, isn't it? Natsuhiko always carried the symbol of the bond he had with his parents. Natsuhiko could feel the misgivings in his heart held against his mother quietly begin to unravel. Obviously, even if he did see her soon, it wasn't as if they could return to a normal parent-child relationship that quickly. But even so,
母さんに会いに行こう。
Salu and Machito silently nodded at the notion. Nobody in town was on their side. Not the city, Not the police, not the school. My mother, my own flesh and blood. That thought was their last hope.
味方になってくれるなら母さんほど心強い人はいない。
だね。何しろラボの幹部だし、世界最高クラスの科学者だし。そう。私もあの人には勝てない。
The three kids smiled at each other. That definitive glimmer of hope was enough to raise their courage a notch.
でも、どうやって博士に会うの？警備が強化されてるって言ってたし、建物の中に入るのは難しいと思うよ。噂によると、ラボの警備員は自衛隊からの出向者で、ゴム弾仕様のマシンガンを持ってるとか。
We don't want to deal with that. But let's not. Not yet, at least. Next time. Natsuhiko's watch. A Salvia-branded watch that Miyoko once gave to Shun as a present. Upon Shun's death, he had Miyoko give Natsuhiko the watch along with a letter he wrote. It is a chronograph furnished with a stopwatch function and uses a self-winding mechanism to charge a battery-powered quartz oscillator. So both the watch itself and its Salvia brand are nothing eye-catching in particular. Regardless, the reason Miyoko gave this watch to Shun was that the brand name Salvia was the name of a flower. Salvia is a type of sage. A sage that can also mean a wise man. Salvia has a wide variety of meanings in the language of flowers. Respect, burning passion, my heart burns, love, wisdom, chastity, familial love, everything is all right. Gift imbued with a hidden meaning in the language of flowers that wasn't actual flowers, but something practical instead. Ever since he was young, the watch has reminded Natsuhiko of how his mother never backed down as a woman, nor as a scientist. Thought always brings a wry smile to his face. Aww. Everything is alright. Everything is finally alright here. Let's hope that Natsuhiko can live long enough to reconcile with his mom.